Warning: the following podcast show that you're about to listen to will include explicit language and content in which you, the members of the audience, may find offensive. Audience discretion is advised.
Welcome to another episode of the Kim Hoang Podcast Experience.
Yeah, boy.
Where anything and everything is a subject matter on the show, and no subject matter is ever taboo.
Damn, that's what's up, my G.
And now, your host with the most, Mr. Kim Hoang. Bro, am I getting paid for this?
Yo, what's going on, ladies and gentlemen? How in the world are you? You know the voice, and you know I am the choice. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't need to really introduce myself, but to those that don't know my name and don't know who I am your host, Kim Hoang, the Asian sensation, and welcome to another episode of the Kim Hoang Podcast Experience. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, coming at you all the way over in the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area in the Asian Sensation Studios. It is good to be here. It is good to do my thing and to do what I'd love to do, that is my creative medium, which is podcasting. And it is good to be back here in studio, in the booth, sitting on my favorite chair, got the microphone in hand, and I'm ready to go. This is great. I'm loving it. And, all is well. All is well. Before I actually got ready to do the podcasting and to be in the studio, I just needed to go ahead and do a little bit of some exercise a little bit. And one of the things I like to do, which is a known fact, is that I like to cut grass, especially around the home. When the grass gets a little tall, I like to cut the grass. Now, I don't really have a big front yard and a big backyard, but with the swift movements and, the speed that I go with, the cardio and just, pushing a lawnmower, it's a lot of work. It is a lot of work, and it is a lot of, body movement, gets the blood flowing, and it's great. But there is a little metaphor that I use when it comes to cutting the grass, because it's just deep. I always say this. And just picture this, just stay with me on this one, that when the grass grows really tall, that is the height of, stress, anxiety, frustration, and the lawnmower is like the medicine for that, to kind of keep it controlled, to, keep those levels down. So I always like to cut out the frustration and cut the anger and the anxiety that is the grass. So this morning, before I actually came to the Asian Sensation Studios, I did cut the grass. It was fun. I always enjoy cutting the grass. It's a peaceful moment for me. You can call it me being a green thumb. I don't know, but I love cutting the grass, and I'm glad that I got it done, because now that's just one less thing that I don't have to worry about anymore. The grass is cut, it's fresh, it's ready to go, it looks like it's got a good haircut, and now I am concentrating and putting all my energies into this today to give you guys a great episode that is the Kim Hoang Podcast Experience. Yes, I did wash my hands, and I did take a quick shower before I headed into the studio. So yes, I don't smell like, cut grass and maybe some oil that might have been on the lawnmower. I don't know, but I am good. You just have to trust me on that. I never want to come in the studio dirty. I always want to come in clean and ready to go. I'm really happy for a lot of reasons. One thing I want to make an announcement on is that I can announce and I can confirm that I will have a guest coming on to my show. I've mentioned her name before, but her name is Natalia. She goes by the moniker by the name of Sinner or Signer. But the way that I read it in the English language, it's Sinner. Syner. She is a great and talented artist coming from the capital of Brazil, in Brasilia. And she is really amazing at her creative medium, being an artist and doing a lot of graffiti work. I had a chance to take a look at her portfolio on Instagram, and even a little bit of some portfolio work that she put on her TikTok. But mostly it's on Instagram, and it's really, really impressive. I like the way that she makes a couple of the designs flow. I like the usage of the color composition and color selection and theory. And, everything that she does, there's either some kind of message or a story behind it. And I'm really curious about that, I know a lot of people, they're going to debate about this, that they're saying there's no way in the world that, a person who does graffiti can be called an artist. That's not necessarily true. I think that, again, I debate the fact that anybody that has a creative medium, that has creativity within them, that does something of that sort, and they put everything out from the mind, to pencil, to paper, and then transfer it over to whatever creative path that they do. I'm all for it. I think it's absolutely amazing. And I'll say this, there's no shame to the game, and I can't wait to actually get to know Natalia and to actually interview her and to know a lot about her. She has a very beautiful creative mind, and we want to know more about her and her process, and other things that we don't want to disclose at this time. But I'm glad that we have confirmed, and that we will have her on the show. She's not going to be in studio, obviously, because living in Brazil, that's a far expensive trip just for an interview. So thank God for technology. And I do want to thank Hector for that, because Hector was hands-on on it. He was trying to tell me to talk to her and to try to convince her to be our guest. I was a little bit hesitant, but Hector was really, egging me on a little bit. He just said, go ahead and do it. Just do it, man. Just do it. Just make it happen, The worst thing that she could say is no, and I think that he was right, and it paid off, because, we will have that interview soon. And when we do have that interview, obviously, we will bring it out here on the digital airwaves as quick as we can. I'm just really excited just for, an opportunity to really get to know her and to see what she is all about. So I'm really looking forward to that. It's awesome. Also real quick, I just want to say that this week coming up, I'm really excited for the fact that the weather in Washington, D.C. is going to improve drastically. In the United States, we measure our weather in Fahrenheit. And I understand that it's going to be mostly sunny this week, so I'm really happy. It's going to be at least about in the 60-degree mark, around mid 60s, so I'm really happy about that. But it's going to reach the highs, the 70s and the mid 70s, and I'm just wow, I'm really happy about that, because fact, I am not a cold weather guy. My people are Asian, and we are tropical people. We love the warmth, and that's what I'm all about. I love the warmth, I love the heat. Anything of that sort I can work with. If it's cold weather, well, I don't prefer it. I wouldn't say I hate it. I just would say that I don't prefer it. You know what I mean? So, God bless the fact that it's going to be warm for a couple of days next week. I'm excited for technically this week coming up, depending on when you're actually listening to this. But it's all good, So I'm looking forward to starting on Monday. There'll be happy days for those 7 days. So I'm excited. Recently, guys, I actually was chilling out and hanging out, and Hector actually told me a few weeks prior that there was going to be a documentary that was coming on Peacock Television, and it was from the WWE, and it was all about Bray Wyatt, about his life. And the name of the documentary was going to be called Bray Wyatt Becoming Immortal. automatically I was sold on it because, number one, I am a huge wrestling fan. And number two, I was a fan of Bray Wyatt. I thought that he was an amazing person. It's no secret that when it comes to documentaries, it's got to be something of my interest. Otherwise, I'm not going to go ahead and pay attention to it. I won't even give it the time of day. If it's something that I like example, I'll watch a documentary about Bruce Lee because it's about martial arts, but also it's about acting and it's about a person that I like. I could watch a documentary about surfing or about maybe about the ocean or something like that because it's peaceful. Anybody about a famous musician or actor or athlete. If it's something that I like, I'm in. I'm totally locked in. And Hector told me that this documentary was going to be coming out soon. And then a few days later, recently, he had reminded me that, it's coming out. And I said, oh, great. When is it coming out? On April Fool's Day. Now, at first, I thought that he was joking because, the nature of April Fool's is that you tell a joke or a little bit of a friendly lie, and then you just say, April Fool's, and it's not true. But when I actually looked on it on, Peacock TV's website and on the WWE website, I knew that it was true. They confirmed it. It was absolutely 100% true. And when it debuted, I actually saw it the day after, mainly because I was so busy on April Fool's that I didn't really have enough time. And I remember that day because on April Fool's Day when I was working, I had a lot of stuff to do on my day job that it just burned me out that day. So I really was concentrating more on just going home, hitting the bed, going to sleep, and getting a good night's rest. Well, I saw that documentary the day after. And it was a 2-hour and 2-minute documentary. And I got to tell you, I was really, really happy to see it. I think I got emotional out of it. I think I cried in some bits and some pieces of it. Because we're talking about a man. We're celebrating the life of a superstar whose life was cut short at the age of 36. I mean, he passed away last year. And, it was great to learn a little bit about, his history, growing up in Brooksville, Florida, as a kid, and then going through the ranks of just, middle school, high school. I didn't know that he went over to community college in California for 2 years for football, and then transferring over to Troy University in the state of Alabama, trying to play Division I football. It was said that he wanted to go to the NFL originally, and he wanted to play for the Oakland Raiders. But when he got to Troy University, he didn't really get to be on the starting team. He was on the second string or something like that. So his playing time was severely limited. And then to hear about when he made the transition of wanting to go into professional wrestling and how he went through the Bush Leagues of FCW, and then he was on that NXT show where he was going to be the next big thing, where he actually had the persona of Husky Harris, which at the time, that was just kind of his way to get into the main, stream of the WWE. But he didn't like that persona. He didn't even like that name. He thought it was very demoralizing. And then just learning about, him going through the ranks with that moniker. And then all of a sudden, he wanted to reinvent himself. And he came up with Bray Wyatt, just basically coming up with a character that was based out of Cape Fear, specifically Robert De Niro's character in that movie. The Southern charm type of, character, but very dark and mischievous. And it was really cool just to go ahead and see him, do his thing and how he came up with that character, how he found success with that character, with that moniker, and then later on transforming it into the Fiend, which was more the devilish demon side of Bray Wyatt. And then finally, recently, just the resurgence of Bray Wyatt as what we knew of his last days. And it was really good to really see a lot of insight from a lot of people. You know, his brother Taylor Rotunda, who was known as Bo Dallas, who used to also be a wrestler in the WWE. His sister Micah, his father, who was a professional wrestler, Mike Rotunda. You might have known him famously as Erwin R. Shyster, IRS. His uncle Barry Windham, who was also a professional wrestler. One person in the WWE who was an announcer by the name of JoJo. And a lot of superstars that just really sung his praises about how great of a man that he was and how kind and the mind behind the wrestler, the creativity, the genius, savant that was Bray Wyatt, but more so the genius behind Bray Wyatt, the man, Wyndham Rotunda. And it was really sad, at the end of it, just to go ahead and hear about his final days and what happened and how he passed away. How he caught COVID, and he had some cardiac issues, and next thing you know, it just kind of caught up with him, and that was it. That one fateful day, he said that he was going to go ahead and take a nap, and he never woke up from it, and he just passed away in his sleep. And when you hear stuff like that, and the person that he is, it's like, at least he kind of went out peacefully, but at the same time, it's like, man, we wish that he didn't pass on, because, at the age of 36, that's kind of like in wrestling years, I feel like you're still reaching your prime, and you still have a lot of potential to do many great things. And the fact that, your life was taken so short, we would never know at this point, how your career in the WWE could be, So just the fact alone, I know that hit a lot of people hard. It hit me hard. It hit a lot of people that I know hard, because they were true, legit fans of the man, the myth, the legend of Wyndham Rotunda, a.k.a. Bray Wyatt. And I just, just to even hear, never released interviews, footages of, Wyndham Rotunda about, his time in the WWE, at certain periods of his life, and the monikers and all that stuff. It was really good to really see that, and just to, kind of hear his truth and his story. A man that really tried very hard in the WWE, the man that was passionate about the business and loving the business, and him being a third generation wrestler. Third generation wrestlers, are very hard to come by, let alone a second generation wrestler. So for the fact that, he came, wrestling was in his blood and in his family, that was wild. That was wild to hear. I never knew that, I knew that Mike Rotunda, IRS, was his father. I didn't know that Black Jack Mulligan was his grandfather, and that's how it started. So, it makes a lot of sense to know about the history and how that family tree worked out into professional wrestling. But we lost a good one in Wyndham Rotunda. And I just hope, honestly, that his family is still dealing with that loss the best way that they can. I still hope and pray that, the legacy of Wyndham Rotunda, a.k.a. Bray Wyatt, will still live in the hearts of everybody, fans, family members, friends, whatever. Because despite the fact of what you saw, of his exterior and his personas in wrestling, on television and so forth, he was really an awesome person, and I've heard a lot of stories about people that have actually met Bray Wyatt. I've never met him in person. I've seen him live, wrestling live. I've seen that, in person, but I've never met the man. But the international consensus, a lot of people have said that Bray Wyatt was a real kind and nice person, and he was always the type of person that was always kind to his fans and smiling and shaking hands and doing things of that nature. And I honestly believe that, because I definitely felt like he was the type of soul that really loved people and wanted to give to his fans, because he felt like that was the right thing to do. That was the professional thing to do, and that was just the way that when you gave to your fans, it's like that's kind of like that's kind of like a sign, that you're doing things the right way. You know what I mean? And for those that really want to see it, you should go ahead and see it. This documentary of Bray Wyatt becoming immortal is absolutely fantastic. The only way that I know how you can see it, at least in the United States, is that you can see it through Peacock Television. If you are a member of it, awesome. If you have Xfinity cable, you actually get Peacock Television for free. So imagine that, So I would say check it out. Watch the whole documentary. It's really good from the beginning until the end. I think that's something that you would enjoy. And, to Wyndham Rotunda, a.k.a. Bray Wyatt, once again, like I said before, rest in peace, man. Rest in peace. So we're going to go ahead and take a little bit of a break. We'll come right back. We're going to talk a little bit more about some other stuff. And we will also, in this episode, have an awesome Q&A session that you want to stick around for. All right, guys. Let's go ahead and take a 5, and we will be right back, because the Kim Hoang Podcast Experience is on fire, and we're just starting to cook. When people ask me what's the best tool that you have for podcasting, I tell them Spotify for Podcasters. Yes, you heard right. Spotify has now created an avenue for podcasters to do their thing. So whether if you need to upload your already made episode or need to create one using their platform on their website or their app, they got you. Also, now you can upload and or create video podcasts episodes with Spotify for Podcasters. How cool is that? And the best part is, this service is absolutely 100% free. That's right. No need to give them any credit card information. Therefore, you don't have to pay any costs or monthly fees. How awesome is that? So, for more information, go to podcasters.spotify.com or go ahead and download the app on your smartphone or smart tablet device for free by either going to the Apple App Store or Google Play Store. Spotify for Podcasters.
And now, back to the Kim Hoang Podcast Experience with your host, Kim Hoang.
All right. Hello. Welcome back to the Kim Hoang Podcast Experience. Thank you so much for returning. We really appreciate it. It was a good moment. It was a real good moment. Just to go ahead and take a little break. I was going over some show notes in the green room, just making sure that I'm looking at the structure and making sure that everything is going to plan. But also, like I said before, when you actually take a break, that's what you do. You take a break. You recharge your energy. You recharge your batteries. And it felt good. It really felt good. But knowing that I had to go ahead and talk about the next segment, I needed to recharge. And I needed to take my time. Because this situation now, about what I'm about to talk about, is kind of near and dear to my heart. And when I talk about subject matters that are near and dear to my heart, there's two things about it. Number one, it's like, all right, cool. It's something that I'm going to talk about and I'm very passionate about. And I love it. I feel a little bit more easier when I talk about these things, because then I don't really have to think as hard, because I have a good sense of knowledge in that area. At least I would like to think so. But also, on the other side of the token, to me, I feel like I get nervous, because even though that it's something that I know very well about, I can jarble my words, and I can get a little bit anxious and nervous. And, when that kind of kicks in, it's like, uh-oh, no bueno, no bueno. But that's okay, because, as always, I always do my best, and I want to go ahead and talk about this, regardless if I make mistakes or not, because I feel like if I do, that's okay. It's only human. And if I don't, well, that's good. Then, it shows that I can do very well, and I sound smooth, and I feel like I'm on top of the world. Now, I may not do it as smoothly as, say, like, Stephen A. Smith or, Joe Rogan, or do I even go as Steve Harvey? But what I can tell you is that, like those gentlemen, I love podcasting, and I do have a passion for it, and that's good. That's what I do best. So, for sure, that's just me in a nutshell, and this is what we're going to do. So, recently, I would say maybe a couple of weeks ago, I've actually had a couple of people reach out to me, some good friends, and we were talking about the world of martial arts. Not so much about like people and stuff like that, like competitors or so forth, but martial arts in general. And I thought to myself, cool, that's no problem. I would love to talk about the martial arts, being a martial artist. And I remember one of my friends, she had asked me a very interesting question. And it got me thinking, man, I really need to think about it some more after the fact. And you know what? Maybe there's a way I can actually make this into an episode and incorporate it into one of my episodes. And that's why we're here. That's why, I'm here at this moment, is to incorporate it into this current episode. And the question that was asked to me about, the martial arts in general was about, like, when is the perfect time to actually start training? Like, what are the age ranges and so forth? And, what are your expectations when you start training in the martial arts and things of that nature? Because, she was considering it. She has children. She was also thinking about bringing her children along with it. But, she didn't really know anything about that realm. So she was asking general questions. And once again, being a good friend that I am, and also being, a martial artist that has trained for many years, I felt like I could handle this, like I could lend my expertise, because of my experience. It's where this question, I can answer it, and what I can say in my response will be applicable to what she needs to know. So, that being said, I will go ahead and attack this question twofold. I'll try to, make it as easy as I can with the easiest terms as possible. So, without any further delay, let me go ahead and attack this question. Now, as far as, what is the perfect age to start training in the martial arts, I have seen children in general train as early as 6 or 7 years old, because in my opinion, that's like the perfect age to start at, because then at that age, I feel like you have a little bit more awareness and a little bit more maturity to, engage in that activity. Not to say that children under 6 are not, but I feel like their attention spans are not really as tuned in and dialed in as, let's say, at least a 6-year-old or a 7-year-old or an 8-year-old. So, I think in that case, I feel like that's the perfect age to start out with if you want to enroll your child in the martial arts. Now, there has been studies where there have been children as early as maybe 4 or 5 that started training in the martial arts. And that's rare because, again, that goes into the fact of whether or not they have the attention span, the maturity, and things of that nature. And I feel like that would be the proper guideline to follow. Anything else, like let's say if you want to do a 2-year-old or 3-year-old class, I feel like, if you want to, that's up to you. But I feel like that would just kind of be, not the right time, at least in my opinion. I know they got like these tiny tigers and tiny tots, but I just feel like that just wouldn't be the right time to do it. You know what I mean? So as early as, like, I would say, like around 6 or 7 is a little bit more ideal. 5 years old, it depends, but if those children are really interested in the martial arts and they really talk about it and they want to do it, then I think that's when you actually engage in that world and you start talking about it. I've seen beginners go as old as around in their like 60s or 70s, because they want to do something to keep themselves engaged physically and to be, physically fit and be physically healthy and not have any, problems, with the physical ailments and stuff like that. And to me, I feel like that's great. That is awesome. That to me, when you start later in life, and you want to start doing it now, it's just, inspiring, because when I look at the older generation, it's like if they're being active and doing that and they're doing pretty well, that gives me something, to look forward to in my later years of life, because if they're out there having fun, kicking and punching and moving and learning, that's just a blessing in itself, that makes me just sit back, relax, and appreciate life and just say, man, they have no excuse and they're doing it, so I should have no excuse and do it at my present age. You know what I mean? Now, being a beginner when you start out in the martial arts, there's going to be a lot of times where people have expectations, and they set the bar too high. You know what I mean? They want to feel like, I'm starting in the martial arts and I'm training, right? And I have to go ahead and achieve things right away. I have to start right away, and I have to know this right away. Ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you something. If you come in with false expectations or too many expectations, that's going to overwhelm you. And the results that what you're looking for is not what you're going to get. That's not what you're going to find. What you're going to end up finding is that you're going to be, nervous. You're going to be frustrated. You're going to be very angry. And then the anxiety kicks in. And next thing you know, what you thought about being a martial artist, you might end up saying, you know what, this might not be for me. And you would just then, unfortunately, quit. Which is something, as a martial artist, for me, I try not to have people quit. You know what I mean? Because to me, in the world of martial arts and in life, quitting is just not an option. There's the can do and the will do, and we'll try and make an attempt. More of the positive way of thinking. You know what I mean? So when I tell people all the time, about like don't have any expectations, I think don't take it too literal. You can have some expectations, but what I mean by that is very simple. When you go ahead and start in, let's say your first lesson of the martial arts and you're starting that journey, just have the expectation that you just want to do well. You know what I mean? That you want to do your very best. Because it all depends on the individual, right? Some people may be able to pick it up very easily because they have a great understanding of it, or quote unquote, they have, the natural ability or a natural athletic ability to do so, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. There are some people that get it that way, and, more power to you, that's great. But on the other side of the coin, there are going to be some people, right? There's going to be some people, a few of them, that start out and they start training and they're not going to get it right away. And that's totally fine. You don't get this movement. You don't get this movement. Maybe, you're trying to do like a side kick or a round kick and it doesn't look as great because maybe you're not turning your hips over, more to actually have that perfect extension and, technique. I get that. Maybe you're trying to learn a form that is just like a crazy new dance to you and you just don't know the steps. It's totally fine. We all get it. As martial artists that have been studying it for years, we know what it's like because it feels like we're basically dancing with two left feet. And I'm going to give you a story. I'm going to give you a story about myself because, years ago when I was really young, I had this expectation and I just thought to myself that because I'm going to go ahead and study martial arts, I'm going to be good as Bruce Lee and I'm going to be good as Chuck Norris, you know what I mean? Because what I saw on TV is exactly what I thought, that it was all about the kicking, it was all about the punching, and it was all about doing this and doing that. It's going to look this way, just like how it is on TV. And I'm just going to be an instant black belt and I'm going to do well. And I probably might get my black belt within like 5 days and things like that. What I failed to realize is that, everything that you do is a challenge and every little thing that you engage in takes time. You can't expect to build Rome in one day. You know what I mean? That is really unrealistic. If you think that you can get a black belt in one day or within maybe 1 month, chances are you have been misinformed. That doesn't mean that you can't have that attitude that one day you will earn it because, if you believe, you can achieve. And I strongly believe that if you do that, if you believe in yourself that you can do it, it will happen. But you have to go ahead and put the hard work in. You do have to train as frequently as possible. You do have to go ahead and make sure that you do what is necessary to make yourself that much better of a martial artist, meaning learning every day and just engaging in the activity. Surround yourself with a good team of instructors to help you out and to just go ahead and put everything into action. Like I said, it took me a long time to earn my black belt. It really did. But the secret sauce for me was very simple. It was just coming in as frequently as I could, attending as much as classes as I could, surrounding myself with the right people, the right, support network, including my instructors, and just, asking the questions and just, going through the motions. Everybody, no matter what you do in life, you're going to feel like a fish out of water for the first time. And that's normal. It's going to be okay. No matter what you do, whether if it's like you're actually, taking algebra for the first time, or if you're going into culinary school and this is your first day of being a culinary student, or learning how to paint, or learning how to draw, things of that nature. You're not going to get it the first time, and it's okay. Don't give yourself that false hope. Don't give yourself that false expectation. Just go in there knowing that you're going to do the best that you can and that you're going to have a fun time, and just, keep going from there. If at any point that you start succeeding and you start building steam and you want to challenge yourself more, fine. Then you can definitely add another expectation onto your goals, you know what I mean, of being a martial artist. But as long as you keep up with the minimum and you stay consistent with it and you see constant results, I say that you're doing very well, and I say that you're going on the right path. Just remember, everybody, started from somewhere, and everybody had their journey. And when it comes to being a martial artist and you're just starting, it's exactly what it is. It's the start. It's the actual genesis of the journey, and the only place that you can go in your journey is to go up. There's no other place to go. You can only advance and go up and see the evolution of who you are as a martial artist. That's it. Now, the greatest thing about being a martial artist is that it's your journey. The time limit of getting to where you need to go, especially on the road to black belt, that is your journey, and it takes as long as it takes. Some people can probably earn it within like 3 or 4 years. Some maybe do it less, depending on, how much dedication and how frequently they come into class and train. It's all about just doing the best that you can and putting in the time and making it happen. And when you do that, I guarantee you that success will come your way. Just believe, never give up. And always remember that patience and training develops character. That is the key. When you understand that and you hear that having patience, doing your training and developing good character, it goes a long way. Trust and believe, it really does. And, if I didn't believe in that, if I didn't believe in just, doing my very best, if I didn't believe in never giving up, and just surrounding myself with the right people and the right network, I don't think that I would have gotten far as I did. So, that does help me out, and it does work for me. Will it work for you? I think 9 times out of 10, I do believe that it will. But it all really depends, once again, on the individual, and it all depends on, what you want out of it and what you want to get out of it. So that's just my 2 cents. We're going to go ahead and stop right here for now. We'll come right back and we'll do a little bit of some Q&A for them. We got some interesting questions. I'm really excited about it. Can't wait to answer it and can't wait to address it and give it the acknowledgement that it deserves. So guys, we're going to go ahead and cut it for right now. We'll be right back. So don't go anywhere at all. You know what I mean? Because the Kim Hwang Podcast Experience, we're coming back. And we're coming back in full force. Better believe. What do you get when you have 2 undercover police detectives that are underestimated who utilize their wit, charm, and skills to outsmart the biggest arms dealer and all of his puppets in the region? Then you get the highly anticipated action comedy film of the century, Miscalculated. That's right, starring Romel Xavier Morales, Dameron Kirby, and an all-star cast. Now streaming on Tubi, Discovered, and Reveal. That's REVEEL. And now available for purchase on Amazon Prime Video. You heard that right. Now available for purchase on Amazon Prime Video. Miscalculated.
And now, back to the Kim Hwang Podcast Experience with your host, Kim Hwang.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the Kim Hwang Podcast Experience. I'm glad that you could be here. It's great. It's awesome. We had a great episode and a good time. But like everyone says, that everything has to come to an end when you start from the beginning. And this is going to be the end of our episode, but not without doing a little Q&A. Question and answer. I love doing these things. It's just amazing. Basically, we select random questions and then we just answer it. The good thing about it is that the questions that were selected, everyone is from the state of Maryland, so it's going to be local, and I love that. Thank you very much. But also, a lot of people continue to respect my wishes, where there are no questions submitted about politics and religion, which is good. You know, I'd rather not answer those type of questions. I feel like those questions really divide people, and it's just a real bad recipe. You know what I mean? What I mean by that is that it's a bad recipe where it could cause a lot of friendships
and there could be like a lot of argument. You know what I mean? So rather than not dealing with that, to avoid that at all costs, we're not gonna answer those questions. I do have 7 questions, and I'm ready to rock and roll, and I'm ready to do this. So without any further delay, we will get to it. Let's go. Question number 1. Why do you like tacos from a taco truck versus Taco Bell? Kenny from Queenstown, Maryland. Real simple. I like supporting local businesses, and I feel like local businesses have much more to prove. Tacos from a taco truck, I feel like, have the better quality and the better tasting ingredients. You know what I mean? And for the price, I feel like it's definitely worth more for the dollar. Especially when you see that the person behind the taco truck, you might be able to catch them really do what they do in order to make your taco or your burrito or whatever. But you just know that you see it, you witness it, you can smell the food. And trust me, I have had a lot of experiences with the taco truck. I think they're just absolutely amazing and definitely worth more, than you bargained for. Taco Bell, I mean, it's good if you're in a pinch, but honestly, I don't want to mess with their stuff. I don't like what my predecessor, Mr. Ron, God rest his soul, he had said. And I think about it. I asked him about if he did like Taco Bell. He's like, oh, hell no. Not me. I don't like grade F meat. I'm like, whoa, grade F meat. And that's the one thing that's always stuck with me. I just don't like meat that tastes really crappy, especially on a taco, the way that Taco Bell does it. American tacos versus like real Latino Mexican style tacos. So yeah, that's just me. So I will definitely choose the taco truck any day of the week. Question number 2. Is art important? From Luis of Catonsville, Maryland. I wouldn't say that it's important, but I think it's a great thing to have, and I think that, having art in general promotes a lot of imagination and creativity, and that goes a long way. I think the arts allows us to be very expressive and can allow us to find a creative medium that we fall in love with. And without that, I just feel like the world would just be a little bit more tense. You got to have the love of the art and to enjoy it and just to do whatever that you want out of that creativity. Because a man with no creativity or a woman with no creativity is just a person that just goes by what is told. There's no creative influence or input involved, and when you don't have that, you're just always going to be that that whatever, or that yes sir or no or yes ma'am kind of a person. You'll just continue to see life in the box rather than outside of it. So that's what I figure. Question number 3. What is your favorite video game console and why? LaShawn from Crownsville, Maryland. LaShawn, is very, very simple, bud. I think I've touched on this many a times before, but I will go ahead and answer the question once again. If I had to choose one, for those that know me, I am a Nintendo Switch guy all the way. They were really big geniuses when they actually invented it. And I just like the versatility of the system. You can play it as a portable system. You can play it, like handheld. You can play it on the television. 3 ways of playing it. Good gaming selection. And even for the young kids, I think they have more games that are more kid friendly, and that's why Nintendo's more concentrated on that than the older kids and the older generation, because of the violence of certain video games. So that's why I like it. Plus the cost of the Switch is a little bit less expensive than you would get like a regular video game console, like PlayStation 5 or the Xbox One, or any of those type of systems. That costs a pretty penny. I wouldn't want to go with it, you know what I mean? So that's just my opinion and my take on it. So that's what I'll say. That's what I'll do. That's what I feel, and I'm sticking to it. All right, good stuff. Question number 4 comes from Amanda of Towson, Maryland, and she asks, what is your favorite karate uniform company besides Century Martial Arts? And if you were to train with a martial arts weapon, what would be the weapon of choice for you to train with? If I wanted to train with a martial arts weapon, I would definitely pick the bow staff because I feel like it's a little bit more forgivable. Basically, it is a wooden staff that's about 5 or 6 feet tall. And, it's easy to do transitions with it and switches, figure eights, and attack modes, and twirling it and catching it because it's a long staff that you can just catch and it's almost fail-safe. If you try to use something like the nunchucks or the kamas, they're great weapons, but they're a little bit trickier because the handles are a little bit shorter, so the degree of making finger rolls and transitions and changes and so forth is a little bit harder. When you toss the weapon and you try to catch it, you have then at this point less than 50% chance to actually catch it with succession. And with the kama, if you catch it with the blade, facing your hand, even though it's not sharp because it's a competition grade weapon, you still have to imagine the fact that you just sliced your hand. Same thing with the katana. Even though it's a longer handle, about about a feet or something like that, or maybe even like a 1.5 feet to 2 feet. If you catch the katana after twirling it and you catch it with the blade first, again, you have to imagine I just sliced my hand or I sliced my fingers. That's not good. So I'd rather go with something a little bit safe, a little bit more forgivable, something that gives me a better chance to catch my weapon after kind of doing a lot of switches and changes and transitions. Now, as far as my favorite martial arts or karate uniform company besides Century, one, I like Ki International Martial Arts because it's basically like the better quality as opposed to Century Martial Arts, but more the fraction of the price. So example, if I could get like a 13-ounce heavyweight karate uniform from Ki International, and that thing's going to be like $99.99. Great deal. Whereas if I got the same thing from Century Martial Arts, they're going to ask for a lot more money than just $99.99. Easily, it's going to be like around $150 to a little bit more, and that's a dangerous price point for me. I also like Sang Musa, now known as Best Martial Arts, because their uniforms cater to martial artists that study the Korean style of martial arts. Taekwondo, Tang Sudo, what else is there? Hapkido. Unfortunately, Century doesn't make those type of uniforms, which puts them at a disadvantage. So I would love Sang Musa / Best Martial Arts for that reason. Good question. I do like it. That was good. Question, let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4, number 5. I recently lost a friendship with a person that I haven't known for very long, but even though it felt like I've known this person forever. So what does this mean, and can you give me any advice? Elizabeth from College Park, Maryland. First off, Elizabeth, I want to say that I'm really sorry about your friendship loss. I mean, it does kind of hurt when you lose a friendship, and it really sucks because it's like you invested a lot of time in that individual, and for it to end the way that it did, at least in my opinion, it's not a good thought. It's not really good. However, this kind of tells me one thing. That the friendship unfortunately wasn't meant to be. Meaning it really wasn't your fault and it wasn't their fault. It just, unfortunately the cards were laid exactly where they were, and it was just unplayable. Does that make you a bad person? No. Does that make that person a bad person? No. It just meant that you guys had differences of opinions on what you thought friendship was all about, and when you exercised your definition and they exercised their definition, you guys didn't agree with that, But life does go on, and I would just advise at that point just to keep it moving and keep stepping, keep walking forward. It's not the end of the world, so don't worry about it. Life is good, and life will be good for you in the end, because then you don't have to worry and stress out about the situation. You just keep it moving and keep it going, and that's the end of that. Question number 6. This is a real good one. What are your opinions on the upcoming 2024 remake film of the classic 1994 film of The Crow? Alex from Randallstown, Maryland. Alex, sometimes there are production companies that do make remakes of certain classic movies, and I try to give it the benefit of the doubt because of a lot of factors, but there are some movies, in my opinion, I feel like should be left alone, and I think The Crow is definitely one of them. I mean, in 1994, that was a classic film. That was Brandon Lee's last stand, and he literally died for that film. And having somebody else play that iconic role that Brandon played of Eric Draven, and then you have Shelley and all those things, and the different storylines that go for that version versus the OG version, it's just insane and crazy to me. And I always have a belief that if there's a movie that's an original and they want to do a remake, I think they should just leave it alone, and especially the way that this happened where another person is actually going to play Eric Draven. I don't really agree with that. You wouldn't find somebody else to play the role of Rocky Balboa in a remake of a Rocky movie, because number one, the Rocky movie doesn't need to be remade, and number two, the only person that ever deserved to play Rocky was Sylvester Stallone. So really, I feel like in that sense, it should be left alone, and it shouldn't be tampered with, and it shouldn't be bothered with. Does that mean that I'm not going to watch the movie? I'll watch it in terms of being very I'm very curious, about how it's going to turn out. But that doesn't mean by any way, shape, or form that it's going to get my verbal support. You know what I mean? So that's where that stands. I mean, do I hope that the movie does well? For its sake, I do, but I don't know. I think there's going to be some purists out there that like the original that's going to be really ticked off about it. All right. Last but not least, we have the last question. What do you think about parents who try to coach their children in the martial arts when they have no formal training or no experience whatsoever? Caitlin from Catonsville, Maryland. This is going to be a rough one, but I'll try to attack it. I'm not, when it comes to parents supporting their children, I'm all about that, and I think it's great, and I think that parents should support their children in whatever they do, because when you show them that love and support, and you let them know, how much, great that they did, even though if they didn't, it gives them that self-confidence, and gives them a chance to really just attack that art or that creative medium and enhance themselves and immerse themselves in that situation. But if you don't know anything about, whatever it is that they're doing, it's best to leave it alone, especially with the martial arts. I've heard of horror stories and even seen it for myself where the parents actually think they know more than the instructor, and they, try to teach them the stuff they need to know by saying, what they're doing is wrong, you shouldn't be doing this in this form, you should be doing it this way, etc., etc. And that gets me upset because I feel like the parents, they send their kids to learn martial arts because, for a lot of reasons, and the one thing that they count on is that they want the instructor, whether if it's the master instructor or just like an instructor that they help bring up, teach them the right way of how to, do certain techniques and absorb certain knowledge and so forth. If a parent tries to play the coach for their kids about, teaching them martial arts and stuff like that, knowing that they have no knowledge or formal training or anything, no experience, you actually put them in the line of fire of danger. You then at that point compromise their safety, and that's not what you want your child to be involved in. You pay the instructor, the martial arts instructor, the master instructor, for quality lessons for their child. You know what I mean? And I think that's important to know, that you got to have faith in that instructor. Let them do what they do. They've been training in the martial arts for years. They know the deal. They would not steer you wrong, and they would not lead your children astray. So just have a little faith, as Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson would say, slow your roll and just, pump the brakes. Allow the teacher, the master instructor, the coach or whatever to do what they're supposed to do, and it'll work out in the end. That being said, I think that's it. I think that's all that we got. It was great questions. I do appreciate the time. Guys, you can find me over on Facebook. Just type in the Kim Hoang Podcast Experience under the search box. I'll be there. I'm on 2 social media platforms. 1, Instagram. 2, X, formerly known as Twitter. Find me at TKH Experience, all in one word, lowercase letters, no spacing. If you follow me, I'll follow you back. We are on a lot of podcasting platforms. We are on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. We are on Amazon Music. We're also on YouTube Music. And now we are on Audible, which is basically a app and a website that you can actually have access to digital books and podcasts. So that's amazing. Yep, Audible. I don't know too much about it, but I will definitely find out more, and I'll let you know within a next episode or announcement of what it's all about. Now, do me a favor. Number 1, like and subscribe to our podcasts on all the podcasting platforms. Number 2, if you have Spotify, please give us a 5-star review. If you have Apple Podcasts, please give it a 5-star review and a basically a positive written review ranking. That way, the more positivity ranks that we get and comments that we get, then the more that this podcast will be over to the front of the class. People will notice it, and they may listen to it, and most likely like and subscribe to it. Now, you can also give it to the word of mouth by talking to your friends and letting them know about that. Spread the word that way, or on social media. Spread it around on TikTok, Instagram, X, formerly known as Twitter, and or Facebook. I'll let the world know. Last but not least, if you want to be on our show, if you want to be like a, like the guest host, or like a special guest, if you basically have some kind of constructive criticism and so forth, or if you have a written question, you can go ahead and just email us. You can email us at thekimhoangpodcastexperience@gmail.com. Whatever the subject is, write it on the subject box, and whatever you have to say, write it in the box. Send it out. We'll actually read the email and get back with you within about a day, maybe 2, because we like to read what you have to say, and we like proper correspondence. So that's it, guys. Thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate your time. It has been a pleasure. Please be safe out there, because it doesn't do me any good if you actually do something foolish and you happen to land in a pine box and get buried 6 feet under. We don't want that. We want you to be healthy, happy. We want you to love life and live for life, because you deserve it. Anybody else that tells you that you don't deserve that is a fool. You know what I mean? So that's all I have to say. So, for the one time, recording all the way in the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area in the Asian Sensation Studios, this is your boy Kim Hoang saying thank you so much for joining us on another episode of the Kim Hoang Podcast Experience. We thank you so much. We appreciate the love and support, and we'll see you real soon. All right? We are out. Peace.